Okay, guys, let's do something different. We always talk theology, we always talk history. We can do that, don't get me wrong. But I would love to hear, because I know that I have these, Star Wars and comic books, Iron Man we were just talking about. Is he a Christ figure? You talk about Superman all the time. Everybody knows you with the comic book figures and all the different artifacts that you have from various mythologies. And they are mythologies. They are great stories of superheroes and stuff like that. So what's that have to do with the Bible and maybe other mythologies that aren't just the biblical ones, but also some modern stuff that you guys like? So it'll be cool to get you guys to kind of come out and discuss that.
Well, I like to start with Jack Kirby, King Kirby, who worked both at Marvel and DC and yet other companies. He was a Jew. I don't know if he was personally religious or not, but he certainly knew about Jewish lore. And in DC Comics, he created this whole thing about the new gods. And this was originally to be a Marvel project, but he had some disputes with Stan Lee there and quit Marvel and went back. Well, he had worked for DC beforehand, but he went back to them in the early 70s. And the New Gods was supposed to be a follow-up to Thor, Odin, Asgard, and all that at Marvel. And the idea is that this is when the old gods died, presumably in Ragnarok. And in the splash panel of the first issue of the New Gods, you see Thor's helmet amid the wreckage. And who were the new gods? It's sort of biblical. There are two opposite planets somewhere, one called New Genesis and the other Apocalypse. New Genesis is a paradise, and the king of the whole thing is called High Father. And the head honcho of Apocalypse is Dark Side. Well, already we're talking about the Kabbalah, because how come there's evil in the world? Well, because God was all in all and wanted to create a world, but if God was infinite, where would there be any ontological space for anything else to exist? So what God did was to withdraw into himself, I think it was called the Simsum, and that left a kind of shadow. In fact, it's just like positrons and antiprotons, though he wouldn't have known anything about that. It's like a living echo of something that's gone. And so Dark Side is like the Mr. Hyde of High Father, and his planet is a living hell, is belching out jets of flame all over the place. It is a chamber of horrors. Well, they're constantly at war. They come up with a plan to have peace by exchanging sons. And so High Father gives up one of his sons, who becomes known as Scott Free. He becomes an escape artist. And he has a hell of a time on Apocalypse. The abuse he suffers, awful. He finally escapes. But the son of Dark Side, Orion, who's the hunter in Greek mythology, he is raised as a prince of New Genesis, and he's a bit too much for them. And eventually, they don't even know who's who at first, and eventually they find out, and various things happen. But one of the new gods is named Metron. And Kirby always said his look was to suggest Leonard Nimoy as Spock. And Metron flies around the universe in the Mobius chair, this throne that has all sorts of technology in it, and whoever sits in it is tied into all knowledge. And this, of course, is Metatron, the angel of Yahweh, who is the one you see at his side in the Merkava visions, the throne chariot of God, and that's what Metron is flying around on. And that's all Kabbalah. And so he he didn't do that for long because it was canceled, but several other creators have filled the gap, and so the New Gods thing goes on, and it was in the recent Justice League movies. And though you only got to see Steppenwolf in there and Desaad, but then finally they showed Darkseid himself, and I sure hope they finish that one up. Well, over at Marvel, Kirby created Galactus, the devourer of worlds. To maintain his existence, he had to suck up all the energy of life from planets, and he wouldn't waste his time looking for them, so he had a herald, the Silver Surfer, who would go through space looking for worlds to be devoured, and he had no qualms of conscience because this is what he was created to do, though they retconned it later. But at any rate, but he comes to Earth and realizes, these people are great. I can't let Galactus have them for lunch. What are we going to do? And so he turns against Galactus. And Kirby made no bones about it. He said Galactus is God. He's supposed to be God. And the Surfer, of course, obviously is a Christ figure. And he turns against Galactus and is then imprisoned on Earth with a modicum of his former power. And then he meets terrible opposition from the xenophobic, frightened herd of Earthlings. He doesn't strike back at him. He's very Christ-like, and eventually he even fights the devil, Mephisto. And it is just incredibly interesting, and it has the meat of it is the mythic biblical subtext in both cases. And then finally, Superman, not Kirby's creation, but the creation of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, two Jewish kids from Ohio who cooked up Superman, and eventually nobody wanted to publish him. I mean, isn't this the way of things? Like Gone with the Wind, the Beatles, the hell with the stuff. Nobody will ever like that. Yeah, right. And so it became newspaper strips, and then the first comic books came out, which were just reprints of the strips pasted together into a book, and Superman took the world by storm. Well, what was the origin of Superman? He's Jesus and Moses. He comes to Earth in this rocket that was kind of like Moses' picnic basket, and on the Nile. And but he's also like Jesus because he's descended from heaven thanks to his heavenly father, Jor-El. And Kal-El, his name apparently means the voice of God. And the further Superman went on, the more the logic of the myth was amplified. And Superman originally had appeared on Earth he appeared in public as an adult and didn't have a costume on. He tried to blend in and sneak his good deeds, but eventually he decided he needed the costume. I forget why. And that's when his career really begins. Well, such a big deal that they're making so much money off him. DC Comics said, we got Superman in 2 titles here. I wonder if we could get some money out of Superboy. The Adventures of Superman as a Boy. And so that becomes, it's got 2 titles every month. And now he lives in Smallville, and he's a young, muscular man, a teenager. And he hasn't met Lois yet, but he's going out with Lana Lang. And and then they figured, well, how about Super Baby? And so as a backup feature, they have the Tot of Steel, who's got a kind of a onesie like my daughters wore when they were babies. And he's lifting tractors over his head and all that stuff. They didn't make that much out of that, but nonetheless, it was the same logic as Jesus in the Gospels, right? Jesus in Mark is a man, but in Luke we see him in Smallville, and then in these backup things we've got the nativity story, and
eventually infancy gospels.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too. Two things. Silver Surfer. I was thinking of the Church of Satan when you talked about him being that way, because the way I've understood the mythology of the Church of Satan, even though maybe they don't actually believe it, depending on the person.
Yeah, depending on the denomination.
Yeah, but the idea is that Satan's he rebels against his creator for his purpose. And it's Silver Surfer rebelling against his creator for his purpose. So it could get into the demiurge and Gnosticism there.
Oh, yeah.
But also, I was going to say, I don't know if you were a fan of this. This is definitely after your times probably of giving two craps about Goku from Dragon Ball Z. He comes in this capsule device from this they're called Saiyans, from their Saiyan planet, which gets destroyed from a space alien called Frieza. And his dad's name is Bardock. Bardock, let me make sure that... Yeah, Bardock is his father. He sends Goku to Earth. And they were testing powers between the kids and stuff like that. Anyway, he sends Goku to Earth in a capsule, and he makes it to Earth safely and gets picked up by this monk who's like out there and practices martial arts, picks him up, and finds out this little kid has a tail. And... next full moon comes, he turns into a giant ape. Because
he's Hanuman, the Monkey King.
Right. Then he cuts the tail off to prevent him from turning into that any chaos monkey again, because he went berserk. Then what's he do? Well, he ends up saving humankind from all these constant invaders who want to destroy planet Earth, because humans are his family now. And so it's this really cool mythological cartoon. Yeah. But I don't know if you got into any of that stuff. Anime does a lot of that.
Yeah, I never got into Dragon Ball Z. But there's a whole nother layer that gets added on with the Galactus Silver Surfer mythology that is in some ways parallel to Jewish mythology. So we have this idea, which is really prevalent in the Book of Enoch, where, surprise, I'm talking about Enoch again. It's really prevalent in there about how the creation was corrupted by these evil forces. And now you have the good, especially with the Messiah, who's going to come along and try to purify it and restore the perfect creation again. And what they're doing now, or at least what they had done not too long ago in Marvel Comics, was that Galactus, we see him as this great baddie, because he's going to destroy the Earth. But we find out, because they sort of retconned it, Galactus is only going to destroy Earth because it contains essentially like an egg to create another of the Eternals. And the Eternals are the reason why the previous universe was destroyed. They basically kept multiplying and essentially corrupting the whole thing, and it brought about the previous universe's destruction. And Galactus is the only person on our side who remembers that from the previous universe. And so now, as the Eternals are trying to spread out through our universe again, Galactus is trying to head them off by destroying all of the planets that hold the egg of an Eternal. And so he's using his Messiah, the Silver Surfer, to go and track down all these different things so he can start purifying the perfect creation of our universe so that it's not corrupted by the Eternals. And I was like, that's fascinating.
Wow.
Like that, I like that better than just the Great Destroyer, because now that makes it so it's like, can you really see Galactus as a bad guy? Because without him, the universe eventually gets overrun by Eternals and the whole thing gets destroyed, and he's trying to save us. It just kind of means that our planet might, go the way of the dodo. And then, of course, we also have in Marvel this one enigmatic figure called the One Above All, which that sounds like El Elyon, the God Most High. And he's like this entity that's more powerful than anything else in the entire Marvel universe. So powerful that he's not actually in the Marvel universe, and it's basically implied that it's Stan Lee.
I was just going to say that. It's a smart-ass joke.
He breaks the fourth wall. He's outside of the entire Marvel universe, and it's like, that's amazing. That's fantastic.
Don't they do that with who's the recent character they've done movies on, and he knows that he's a character?
Deadpool.
Deadpool.
Yeah. He'll like just turn around and like talk to the camera, and then other people like, who are you talking to?
It's almost like Enoch in a weird way, kind of, because Enoch gets to peek on the outside of the realm.
Yeah, he gets to go up there
picture. And notice in Enochian literature, I found this interesting by John J. Collins. John J. Collins talks about how in the Bible, human action is important on changing events. In fact, hey, Nineveh, repent of your deeds and God won't destroy you. If you don't, he will. So it's not determinism. But in Enochian apocalypticism and Enochian Judaism, it's all predetermined. So Enoch gets to peek at the plan.
Yeah.
You see, it's like Deadpool seeing the maker who's writing the comic book. And I think it's just kind of this, I don't know if there's other mythologies, because you're the guy to ask about that, like that do this strange thing. But I know John J. Collins thinks Persian influence is where that predeterminism comes from.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right.
I just love this stuff. This is fun.
Yeah.
And that the Persian influence also seems to be where the idea that human morality has some role in the grand scheme of the universe, because used to, the gods didn't really much care what you did. I mean, like if you stole from somebody, who cares? Just don't mess with my priest and don't destroy the temples and you're good. I mean, King David runs around, he runs a whole protection racket for a while, and nobody cares about that. Saul is always trying to like spear him to death every time they sit down for a meal, and God's cool with it. But then later on, if you think the wrong thing, that's helping the forces of evil. And that plays a huge role in Zoroastrianism, because you have these cosmic forces that are that are battling it out behind the scenes, and if you're doing the wrong thing, well, that can kind of tilt the scales.
That is profound
to Ahriman, and so it's like all of a sudden, Yahweh's concerned with the minutia of human morality, and it's like,
didn't the Greek gods do like the Greek gods didn't really get into all that. As long as you worshipped. Gave them their homage, they were cool.
Yeah.
That's why I think sin, like Rudolf Otto says, was originally uniquely religious in character. It was profaning the sacred. Like I remember when a kid, we were in high school, the kid next to me took the communion wafer and balled it up like a spitball and dropped it into the cup of grape juice. I thought, what the hell are you doing? That was a sin. If he'd robbed a store, that would have been wrong, and there would have been big repercussions, but it wouldn't have been a sin, because a sin is uniquely done against God, which is why some of the sexual things, for instance, were wrong, or you can't eat pork, you can't wear a garment woven of two types of material. Nobody in their right mind ever thought it was immoral to have a ham sandwich. That's not what was wrong with it. It was wrong. It was a sin because it contravened the boundaries of the creation. So that misunderstanding has just made a laughing stock of the idea of sin, unfortunately, though strangely, it was a big step forward, because the prophets seemed to be the ones that made the big step. They said, you know what? God is sick of holding his nose when you people come into his temple. And if throughout the whole week you've been ripping off your employees and all this stuff, you don't think God cares about that? As long as you show up for the floor show? No, these are sins too. That's a huge step forward, but it did kind of scramble everything up. So if it's against God, that's a sin. But if it's against another person, that's not necessarily against God.
Yeah. Now, we have to ask about Star Wars.
Mm.
So, Obi-Wan, he's like, he kind of starts the whole thing off, and he teaches Luke, but then at the end of the first movie, he's killed by Darth Vader. Is Obi-Wan John the Baptist? Or is he Jesus?
He sounds like John the Baptist or Elijah with an even greater one to come.
Mm-hmm.
And then what is Darth Vader? He's like almost the redeemed redeemer. That he's like a messianic child to begin with, but then he goes off track. No doubt traumatized by the fact that everybody called him Annie. That probably was enough of a horror to.
I would probably turn to the dark side after
Yeah,
that.
and so he gets.
Don't laugh. You're next.
He's just like Arthur in Excalibur, where he's impetuous and not yet ready to shoulder the responsibility that his power entitles him to. And so that kind of wrecks everything. And the question is, can you pull anything out of the fire? Is anything retrievable? And the most remarkable thing about Star Wars, which I kind of think was just slapped together, I doubt if they knew where they were going from one movie to the next, but the happy result is you have this astonishing thing where the Christ becomes the Antichrist and then the Christ again. Yeah. I mean, that is really something. He's killing children, and yet he winds up as the good guy again. That takes a lot of guts, I have to admit.
The character arc, which personally I think that the character that they were creating in episodes 1, 2, and 3, I don't see how you can get Annie and turn him into Darth Vader. It seemed like they were building up a character that would have resembled Loki, not Vader. He was just like, I don't know, whiny and kind of conniving, and I don't know. However, I think Walter White was a fantastic Darth Vader, because like he literally went from, this school teacher. He went from, Malcolm in the Middle. He went from Malcolm's dad to Darth Vader, and they were very subtle about it, because like when you're watching the thing, within the first couple of episodes, he puts a person in a basement and chains him up to a post, and then murders the guy, and the guy gets dissolved in acid. And you're like, oh my, he's trying to do this stuff because he's got cancer and he had to do all this, and this guy was going to kill him. And eventually, at some point in the series, you realize that he's actually the villain. And then you have to go back and look at like episode 2 or 3, and you're like, he was the villain all along, Jesse was the hero. Walter White was the villain. But it's like he went from Malcolm's dad to Darth Vader. I think that was a better character progression. They needed to make Anakin needed to be a different character if he was going to develop into Vader. It just that thing just wasn't convincing. It's like, that guy isn't Vader. That's like Loki. That character would have become Loki, not Vader.
Interesting. Yeah, Walter White was a real interesting case. He awakens to his true identity pretty early on, after he sees the possibilities of being a drug lord, and his motive is good, but it's the occasion for him awakening when he says to Jesse, I am awake. And Jesse doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. Well, he's discovered his true self, which is evil. He becomes Heisenberg, and then he admits in the way toward the end to his wife that, I always said I was doing it for the family, but that wasn't really true.
I was doing it for me.
Yeah.
I felt alive. It felt good. Yeah.
Really remarkable, really gutsy.
Walter White was a fantastic villain. One of the best written villains, in fiction.
They
ever.
did, I have to admit, and we got 5 minutes here. I have to admit, just my one comment, watching that show, they tiptoe between white, gray, and black in terms of if you were to put morals on that, white being pure and clean to black being wicked here. They tiptoe so carefully, like early on, he allows Jesse's girlfriend to overdose.
Yeah.
And for selfish reasons, even though you feel what he's doing, like you become the person who really kind of feels like she's going to cause a real problem, and he really does want to help protect Jesse, and she's going to cause him to die quick, the way things are heading. So then what happens? He lets her die, and you part of you is like, you asshole. The other part of you is like, I get it. I totally get it. And it's like, whoa, when you can get an audience to read or watch and they're siding with this person to some degree, it's just interesting to me. It's really interesting. Like, I kind of feel like it happens in the Joseph story in the Bible. The brothers all ready to kill Joseph. One of them's like, no, let's just sell him. All right. They go through a bunch of hard crap in life. They're really the villains.
Yeah.
And in the end, Joseph's totally forgiven of it.
Yeah.
You know, don't worry, what you meant for evil, God meant for good, which is like the purpose. But
They're like Pilate in the gospel. You wouldn't have any authority unless this was written into the script, so you're not really responsible.
right. And then what happens? At the end of that, I mean, he starts to reveal himself, but he wants him to feel a little bit of the pain.
Yeah.
You know, and and you kind of feel
Sticking
bad
it.
for the brothers too. Like, keep the youngest there. What did he do? He wasn't there when you got thrown in the pit. Oh, so you're gonna punish the littlest one in a sense? You know, like it just is really. They did good. The narration of that.
That is so brilliant. Yeah, really incredible.
Yeah, the morality in Breaking Bad, I think it was done very well, because you go through at least the first couple seasons pulling for the bad guy, and then you realize, oh man, I sided with the villain. I sided with the villain. And then he's like, I'm in the Empire business, and it's like, oh yeah, he's part of the Empire. Now there's Darth Vader. He's part of the Empire. Okay. So yeah, I think that was a great mythology in there.
Can I say that I didn't like the brother-in-law, the cop, until I realized that I don't know, I still didn't like him somewhat towards the end. Like, just being completely all law and order and no flexibility on family. But when you realize who the hell Walter White is, I mean, put yourself in his shoes. You're talking about a kingpin. You're not talking about a guy who's selling a bag here and there to make money for his family. Yeah. That's insane. Yeah. WW. Eyes opened up.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And Hank was a very interesting character. He was kind of, I don't know, very cringeworthy, you know. He would say things, you're like, but eventually you're like, okay, I understand him.
Yeah.
You know, all of Breaking Bad was amazing, though.
Yeah.
So.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Hit that like button, share this with a friend, and join our Patreons. It helps us grow. It really does. There's also one-time donation options. Just go down in the description. You'll see what I mean. Love you guys.